free to take it away.
Okay, so if there are no questions to start off with, I can just start with a preview of our litigation best practice template and how we've thought we would create a litigation sections that are good and universal for all types of litigation. Obviously, they can be tailored to specific nuances within your state or jurisdictions. So I'll just get started with sharing my screen. My screen's over here. Sorry, I'm going to be looking this way. So Jasmine, let me know if there's any questions and I'll pause and answer those. So we start off with the sections listed here on the left, litigation, combined pleadings and motions, because there's a lot of similar fields that we would use in both of those sections. We've also combined experts and witnesses. We have written discovery, and then we've also pulled out depos, subpoenas, and interviews. Then we move down to mediation and just the general sections that are available in your templates, and then appeals at the bottom. So I'll start with the litigation section. So what we've done here, not sure who's on the line right now, but what we've seen in a lot of the original Filevine builds is that there is litigation information included in your case summary section. Probably not necessary if your case is going to settle and that case is not going to litigation. So what we've done here is pull out that litigation information and create a litigation section where you can track all of that information. So included here is the date the suit's filed, your jurisdiction. There are some contingency fields here that are available. A link field here for local rules, your judge, judicial assistant, any judge's rules that you want to link to that you need to reference often. There is a case style field here. The way that we've utilized this and users have found helpful is a good example would be if you have a notice of appearance and the content of that notice of appearance is the same no matter what jurisdiction you are filing in or practicing in. So instead of having to have several versions of that same notice of appearance, you can enter your case style here and then use this case style field selector in your doctrines. So then you're limiting the number that you have to generate and just limit it down to using the case style as a field selector when that document generates. We also have fields for the plaintiff and defendant's caption. If there's multiple plaintiffs, a good example of when that might be used is when you're only representing one plaintiff in the action and there are other plaintiffs that have counsel as well. Then we can move down here. You can indicate whether those have settled or been dismissed or both. Additionally, we have a field for defendant caption, and are there multiple defendants outside of that initial defendant? If there are, you can include those here as well. So we've chosen not to use a collection section for defendants because it is much easier to generate doctrines if you have that information on a static section. So obviously this template is built out in a way that you are representing the plaintiff, and we would want to probably move those fields around if you represent the defendant in the action. Moving down to the litigation dashboard. So this section, super helpful. I know that deadline chains are really good and great and often work for a lot of situations, but what we found in litigation is that you can have a case management order come down that those dates are able to be adjourned, moved out. You can stipulate to extending those dates. So you don't always have a consistent deadline chain that's going to be applicable each time a case management order is entered. So we found that this dashboard works a little bit better because behind these fields, you can have specific reminder schedules for each of these fields, or you can choose to use the same reminder field or schedule for each of these. Then if you have an ad hoc deadline, easy enough to go over to your ad hoc section here and add that date. These are set up more for federal, so obviously these can be changed, but you can get the idea of what that would look like. Proof of service. So depending on where you're practicing, you may need a proof of service, definitely for discovery. The way this is set up, and as you'll see here, we're not using person fields, and that's intentional. The reason being is you can have a firm that you're serving that may have 5 or 6 attorneys that work at that firm. So in order to be able to generate your certificate of service or affidavit of service in a way that you're able to combine all of that law firm's information, including those attorneys, their email addresses, and who they represent, we found that a text field works a lot better. So you'll have to manually enter these and manually maintain them, but when you're generating your proof of service down here, it comes out and is formatted a lot nicer. Then if you add your email addresses here, separated by a comma, you can have your generic email proof of service template right here. We've included arbitration and the trial information in this section. You can always choose to move your trial information into a separate section if you want to include additional information. We have an arbitration section here. It's not used very often, but it is available depending on your practice. The trial section here has a similar, has your pretrial conference date here, any trial notes set for trial. Did you receive your trial order? So it's a similar dashboard right here. And then you have bench and jury trial. Some additional fields will pop out when you select jury, and any trial notes or trial documents. Does anybody have any questions about how that's set up? No?
Doesn't look like any have come through just yet.
Okay, all right, so I'm going to move over to the pleadings and motion section. Actually, Jackie, do you want to add anything coming from a defense side of what you would recommend differently in this section?
Yeah, in the litigation portion, the only thing I would add to that is to add additional plaintiffs to it. So if you ever have additional plaintiffs needed down here where it says plaintiff 2, plaintiff 3, you can have it, is there additional plaintiffs? If yes, then we have all the way up to maybe 5, 6, 7, depending how large it typically goes. That would be the only portion to really add in on that.
Okay, great, thank you. Okay, so I'm going to move over here to the pleadings and motion section. So I think this section is really cool. I hope I can explain it without it sounding too complicated. And if you have any questions, please stop me and I can review anything that I've gone through. So it starts with a complaint item here. This is again assuming you are the plaintiff, or you can choose any with the filing party, whichever it is. But let's assume we're the plaintiff in this example. We start with our complaint, the title of that document, the docket number, the date it was filed. You can upload a court filed stamped copy here, the defendant that was served. So you'll notice that this is a person field and not a list field, and that's done on purpose. If you have multiple defendants that you are serving, you'll want to create a complaint item for each of those. The reason being is that a defendant can be in default. And if we list multiple defendants here, you won't be able to track which defendant is in default. So what we've done here is that when you come down to is the defendant in default, you can select yes, and then you can track that default information. I've also added a link field here. And what this link field does is it allows you to establish the relationship to any response that is filed for this complaint. So an example of that would be, I'm going to close this, is the answer. So the next document that gets filed in this particular action is an answer. It could be a motion to dismiss, or again, they could default. So in this example, the defendant answers. This is the defendant. We can list the defendant here. We have the defendant's counsel, and now we have that link field again. So what this link field is doing, again, is establishing that relationship. So what I've done, I'm just going to click save for. What I've done here is I'm going to copy this answer item and come back to my complaint and drop that in here. So once I save this, now, once my docket grows and expands, I could have I don't know, 40, 50 items in here, and maybe there's a motion to dismiss that gets filed, maybe there's an answer that gets filed, and you need to be able to see what those groups of relationships of documents are. It's easy enough to do just by coming in here and clicking. So this is a list field, so you could have multiple items related to this. So are there any questions about that? Because that could be a little confusing, and maybe I could have done a better job of explaining that. Nope. Okay. Another example of an item that can be added here is your motion. So with your motion, you're going to have your objection, your reply, your hearing date, your time, if a video appearance is needed, any Zoom links, notes, a task flow if you want to task someone with a responsibility associated with this phone or video appearance. Was a court reporter needed? Again, another task flow, and you can enter the court reporter right there. So this link field, again, works really well right here. If we have our original motion, and then you want to be able to establish relationships to any objections filed, any replies filed, and maybe that final order that gets entered.
And as you can see throughout all of the sections Nikki's talked about, there's instruction fields, which we highly recommend doing. So she has some at the bottom there. You can add emojis, or is that what they're called?
Yep.
My brain is just not working today. I felt really old asking that. But you can add emojis. Some people like to add like a red stop sign if it's something super important that folks are going to need to look at. But this allows both you and your staff just some more guidance on kind of what they need to do there. It fills the space in for any questions that may arise, and to just make sure that things are done the correct way and not have people assume kind of what should be done there. So would highly recommend kind of doing those throughout. And then in order to bold it, there's different formatting that you can do to do that. And that can be found on a support page. I'll drop the link in the chat. That way you all have it in case you all are wanting to go through and kind of put those instruction fields throughout.
Thanks, Jasmine. Okay. All right, I can move on to the next section if nobody has any questions, or if someone wants me to review a specific section, you could let me know. No. Okay, let's move on to expert and witnesses. Okay, so this is a collection section. The idea behind this section is that you can have many witnesses. You may not choose to subpoena all of those witnesses. You may just choose to create a witness list, and that way, using the collection items here, you can do that. You just would select the type. In this example, a witness, you'd enter that witness here, witness counsel, the interview date, and whether or not that witness is favorable, and any hot docs associated with that witness. Once you accumulate multiple items in this section, you can sort by the type, which is selected right here, and then you can use a filtering to see whether or not any of those are favorable. And if you choose from that list, maybe you want to subpoena some of those witnesses, and then your subpoena would be tracked in this section. So instead, if I choose expert, you're going to have different fields that show up here. And here's one of those emojis that Jasmine was talking about. Just brings your eye to this and make sure that you take a look at this information that's written here. So what this is saying is that we have an expert. Who's that expert? But enter them here. But we're not going to have that CV in this section. We're going to include the CV inside of the expert contact card. And why would we want to do that? The reason we want to do that is because if you use that expert on multiple cases or projects, you don't want to have to upload that CV every single time that you enter that expert. It would be nice if that CV is associated with that expert in their contact card. And then instruction text is here on purpose so that if someone's new to the project and they're not familiar with that, they know where to go to find that CV. Then we have the date retained, retainer amount, retainer agreement, and a space for notes and any hot docs or expert report or expert document list. Okay. No questions? This is way too easy. Okay, next section, depot, subpoena, and interview. Another collection section here. So let's pop into one that's already been created. So this is an example of instruction text up here, letting users know where the documents saved in this section will be stored. Any transcripts, it says here, will be stored in the transcript folder, and the other documents in the discovery folder. We also included here a training video. These are really nice to include in your sections here to the left. It provides a specific outline of how you want users to utilize this section without them having to get training, or maybe there's specific information that you can include in this video that will help users that are not familiar with this particular section. So maybe you have somebody onboarding or someone who is being promoted to a different department. They come in, they're familiar with Filevine, but they're not familiar with how to use this section. This is a great resource and a great tool, and we definitely suggest incorporating those into your sections here to the left. So the type of, we have a drop down here, depot notice by us, interview, notice by us or other parties, subpoena, and then third parties. So what we have here is the depot notice by us. You can select a type. Again, this is set up for federal, so you can always change this depending on where you practice. So let's select Rule 45 here. And let's say for demo purposes, we're looking for depot and docs in this particular one. So here's your deponent. Here's the deponent's attorney, maybe the primary taking attorney, information goes there. The date it was scheduled. This is a deadline field so that you can get a reminder for when this date is coming. The time, whether or not this is in person or via Zoom. If it's in person, you have a place to enter that location. You can generate your subpoena from here using this information that is updated in this upper portion. Once that subpoena is served, you can enter a served copy or upload a served copy right here. Some more instruction text with an emoji to include your court reporter, the confirmation of that court reporter if needed. Did you need a video for this deposition? And this is just a little checklist to make sure that certain things have been completed in preparation for that deposition. Then you have a section for your depot interview preparation, another deadline field here. Spaces for notes and documents that you need to prepare for that depot. And this section down here, document production tracking, is contingent on what you're selecting up here. So if you're to depot only, you're not going to want to see that doc section. But if you select docs only or depot and docs, you will pop out this section down here. This information is to keep track of documents requested and when the production due dates are. Location for the production, the date and time that it's due, any objections. Objections served, yes or no. And then at the bottom, you have your space for transcripts, exhibits, errata sheet, and video recordings. Any questions? No? Okay, move on to written discovery. So written discovery, another collection section. The way this is built out is based on our action. So any item that you select here is going to be the action that we are taking as the user in Filevine. So for example, if I start out with expert disclosure requests, that means I'm requesting those expert disclosures. So for this demo, let's select interrogatory request. So I'm requesting those. Again, you see here, I have a training video of how to utilize this section. Some of the more complicated sections like this discovery section and maybe the pleadings and motion sections are good areas to include these training videos so that if users have questions, they can take a quick peek at this. So in this example, we've selected the request. We're going to enter the plaintiff, defendant, any additional defendants, defendant counsel, additional defendant counsel, the title of the document, if you want to include who drafted it, the set number. So what the set number reflects is whether it's the first, the second, amended, supplemental, so anything like that. The date it was served, that served copy of the interrogatory here, and their response due. And then some instructions about if that date falls on a weekend, what to do there. Response served. Was the response served? Yes or no? So if it's yes, the date it was served, and the title of that response. If no, nothing's going to pop out. So as we all know, with discovery, there's always a request for extensions. So this is a way to keep track of the number of extensions requested and the data associated with those extensions. So for example, the date the extension was requested, the number of days, the original response date, and the new response date. So what this instruction tells you here is that when a new response date is confirmed, you must update the response due date deadline field above. So if this date is not updated above here, you're not going to get a reminder that there's a new response due date. So that's just a little call out there to make sure that this field up here is also updated. Discovery disputes. Is discovery defective or insufficient? If you select yes, you can take notes of plaintiff's position and then defendant's position. Did you file a motion to compel? So this is a yes no question. More instruction text here saying that if you're filing a motion to compel, track that motion in the pleadings and motion section, including objections, replies, and a hearing. So this is more for reporting purposes. This is not going to track your details related to that motion. As the instructions let you know that those details related to the motion are going to be tracked in this section over here in the pleadings and motions. Any discovery notes, any documents you want to upload, and then your email to proof of service contacts. So that comes in, this email is going to pull all those email addresses that we would have listed in the litigation section, in the proof of service section that we looked at earlier. So the discovery is the same for each of these. The one that's a little bit different is the Rule 26 conference. But plaintiffs, they all pretty much are set up in a similar way. Okay, gonna move on to mediation if there aren't any questions. Okay, another collection section. We have our notes letting you know where the documents are saved, another training video. I'm just going to start with your mediator. Mediation date, time, method of mediation, in person or Zoom. Any documents, date mediation, notice served, defendant's mediation statement, plaintiff's mediation statement, minimum authority from client, top offer. And then you have your mediation outcome. So if the mediation is continued, you have information here to be able to track that continue date. If there's an impasse and you're not going to settle through mediation, you can note that here. If it's settled, you can also note that here. Mediator invoice received. If yes, if you need to track that information here, you can. And if no, it's not something that you're going to be paying, then you could just indicate no, or you can have instruction text here to tell your users what to do if they receive a mediation invoice. The last section that's left here, that's not a built-in section, the doc section, the calendar, and the ad hoc deadlines are all built in, but the last section here is the appeal section. If you do handle appeals, we do have this built out for you so that you can use this or update this or revise this as needed for the party filing the appeal. Any of these parties here. So let's say plaintiff, appeal participants, make sure to update the primary court dropdown. Yes. So this right here is just instruction text. Right now it's blank. So this is going to be dependent on your jurisdiction and where you practice. Date the appeal open, the case number, the judge, the brief, nature of the appeal, oral argument request. You can calendar this date, the briefing, oral argument, time of oral argument, appeal decision, denied, granted, granted in part, and then requesting records and transcripts. And these are, again, deadline fields so that you can add reminder schedules behind these. And then you have a place to upload your records and your transcripts here. So that's a run through of our lit sections. We keep our lit sections outside of our templates because we update them frequently based on feedback and new adjustments that we see might work better in certain areas or circumstances. And then we help users either optimize their current templates and incorporate any of these sections or all of these sections. Some folks have litigation sections that they don't really utilize, so we can help beef those up and optimize to incorporate any or a lot of what you've seen here today. I don't know, Jasmine, if you can see if there's any questions that have come in.
No questions have come in so far, but would maybe recommend, I know Nikki mentioned that, you know, some of your cases are not always going to have all of those steps, right? You're not going to have appeals or litigation or anything like that. And so initially hiding those sections might be really beneficial. To not confuse maybe new folks that are not used to Filevine and seeing all of those sections, and also to keep your Filevine a little bit more clean as you're going through your process. And so that can be done on the back end through Customs Editor. And then you would just toggle them on. And again, you can add instruction texts. So you see there, they have the option to show or not be shown, which means that they're either initially hidden or initially visible. You can add instruction text into one of your other sections that says, if this is going into litigation, be sure to, you know, select manage sections and turn those on. We typically do that for like our referred out section or things like that in our general PI templates. And again, it definitely helps with just making sure everything looks clean and organized. For some firms that, you know, works, really well. For other firms, they're like, we'd rather see everything in alphabetical order, or, you know, whatever. Filevine does have the ability to be configured to kind of whatever you all are looking for. But we've seen kind of that be beneficial for folks to not get confused as having some of those sections hidden, especially if they're not going to be used for every case. Yeah,
that's a great point. Really good point. And we recommend that, like Jasmine said, all the time. Some things I didn't go over, phases here. I know a lot of folks that we see when we're doing optimization, they just have one litigation phase. Depending on how litigation heavy you are, you might want to think about breaking those out. And we have some suggestions here that we've seen work well for litigation heavy firms. So,
and I would maybe recommend, I know in one of the sections Nikki went over, there was 2 different deadlines. One was maybe 10 days out of the other deadline. You can create deadline chains if you know that that's something that you're going to see frequently, where, hey, based off of this deadline, we have another deadline that's always going to be, you know, 15 days out from that one, and another one that's going to be 10 days out. You can go in and create deadline chains to kind of help without having to do some of that mental math, right? Human error comes into play when you're having people try to calculate number of days. And so deadline chains might be really useful in those situations. Those are created on the back end org wide, and then can be utilized on a project level, depending kind of on what you're looking to do. And we did a free help on that. If you all weren't able to join, the recording will be up on our website. If you're like, I have no idea what deadline chains are, you'll be able to look at that, or you can always email us and I can send you the link directly for that recording. I'll go ahead and put my email as well as Nikki's email in the chat. That way, if you all have questions that come up, or if you want to kind of retain our services, if you liked the sections that you saw and you're like, that would take forever to build out, or I don't know where to start, VineSkills does offer services for optimization and implementation. So if you all are already utilizing Filevine, but you kind of want your Filevine to maybe work a little bit better, there's some things that need to be tweaked, or if you're like, we need deadline chains and we have no idea how to do those, and we also don't have the capacity or time, you can always retain VineSkills services to get you a team member, a VineSkills team member on your team to help you with your Filevine optimization. Again, the same thing for implementation. If you have yet to start in Filevine, but you're kind of looking around trying to see if this is a good option for you, you can always reach out. We do launch folks as well. So we would upload our best practices template, tweak it if it needs to be tweaked for you. So if you did like some of those litigation sections, we can get those added in for you. We also do training. So if you have anybody that is on your team or yourselves that you're looking to get more in-depth training or specified training to your particular Filevine, how it works, operates, all of that. We're kind of a catch-all for things Filevine and Filevine products, FVDA, lead docket, all of those things. I'm not sure if there were any other questions, not necessarily just litigation related, but if you all had questions in general about Filevine, we'd be happy to answer them, or at least take a stab at getting some of those answered for you as well. So feel free to drop them in that Q&A and we can kind of get those answered for you. Nikki, I don't know if you have any other tips, tricks, things that you've seen working in Filevine, especially the litigation route as folks are going into trials, you know, things that are beneficial for them to kind of do.
One thing I've seen work well, which is not something that I showed today, if you decide to go the route with having your litigation information not in your case summary section, what I've seen work really well is to have like a section that indicates whether your project is litigation ready. So you can incorporate maybe a process in that case summary section that says, let's review this project for litigation, have an approval process, and then in there incorporate instruction text that says, okay, this has been approved for litigation. Now let's turn on all of those litigation sections, and then those get turned on. And when you turn on those sections, you can have it set up so that those phases that are related to that litigation section also pop out. So there's just some cool stuff that you can do to really streamline the lit section, because unless you're strictly a litigation firm, you're probably not going to need those until later on in the process. So that's all I have for lit.
Thanks, Nikki. I guess we can see if anybody has any questions. We'll wait around for a few more minutes. Again, anything Filevine related and or lit related, we'd be happy to answer for you. Again, in that Q&A, feel free to type out whatever you're looking to get answered.
So what's the next webinar that's coming up, Jasmine?
Our next one, let me pull up my spreadsheet
Oh,
here.
sorry, not webinar.
It's okay, it's webinar format. Our next one is tags, tips, and tricks. So even the stuff that Nikki went over today, you could add tags for, that way you're not having to like search through if you have specific like items. I'm trying to think of something trial related, you know, that might be a good tag. Typically we do like the type of incident, or if it's a high like stakes case or high profile case or whatever that looks like, we'll add those tags there. And so we'll be doing that next week to kind of give you all tips and tricks. But I would say for litigation, if you all are using guest access, know that folks can see the tags. So be cognizant of that. If you're using the guest section for either like maybe co-counsel that you all are working with, or if there's another plaintiff maybe that's represented by another firm that you want them to see your documents or your info, you can kind of share those guest access wise, and they are able to see some of those other details. So just be cognizant of that when you're going in to do that guest sharing. Okay. Looks like no questions have come through. Again, like Nikki mentioned, next week, tags, tips, and tricks every Wednesday, free help. This same time, this same link. We appreciate you all for joining us. And again, if you have any questions about Vine Skills Services or need anything, feel free to reach out. I put both of our emails in the chat, as well as that formatting if you all are looking to do instruction text. That will have how you like italicize, bold, all of that. But we appreciate you all stopping by, and hopefully you learned something, and have a great rest of your day. Thanks, Nikki.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.